very good. Joel, if you know how, would you mind updating your participant name to show your affiliation? And if you don't know how, I can do it for you. Great. Clearly, you've been in 1 or 2 Zoom meetings over the last 3 years. You knew just what to do. Welcome, everyone. And for those of us who are watching on the live stream, we'll get started in about 3 minutes. Welcome, everyone who is either joined online or within the webinar here. We're really glad to have you. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind updating your participant name to include your affiliation.
Can do. I'll do that right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome, welcome. Nice to meet many of you. Ezra, if you wouldn't mind just adding your affiliation, I think you are serving as an alternate on a regular basis, so that would really help us out.
Oh, just say public counsel.
That sounds great.
Okay. See if I can do that.
I'm happy to do it for you too.
I've got it.
Great.
Okay.
And Alondra, welcome. If you wouldn't mind updating your participant name to also be your affiliation, that would help me. We're going to give everyone another minute or two. We know how back-to-back meetings work. And I'm going to channel my inner school teacher and start looking through my attendance list here. So let me see who we have. Oh, great. We have Fred. Welcome, welcome. Fred, if you wouldn't mind also updating your participant name to include your affiliation, and same thing for Katie. Great. Very good. Well, taking some notes here, seeing who's able to join. I see one more person from the Sierra Club is joining, so we'll let them settle in. And if anyone needs help updating their participant name, just let us know. And I would defer to Meredith on PSE to get everyone's organization name spelled correctly with the rename. Okay. All right, welcome, Jim. I've just been asking people to update their participant name so that you know who each other are, and this is being live streamed and recorded so that others can know who you are as well. All right. Well, I think we can slowly start getting going with some of the basics, and I think we'll have others trickle in, like Aliza. Wonderful. We'll let Aliza connect to audio. Welcome, Aliza. Thanks so much for joining. I've just been asking participants to update their username, and that just helps us, as well as this is being live streamed, so anyone to know who you are in that setting as well. Great. Well, if I could kick off this meeting officially, I'll introduce myself in full in a little bit, but for now, Sophie Glass, I'll be your facilitator. You can go to the next slide, please, Will. So a hearty welcome to your first meeting as a resource planning advisory group. It's an incredibly exciting time at PSE to be joining this process. Thank you for taking the time to create an application, the thoughtfulness you put in there, and I think PSE is just really delighted to have you as part of this. So a hearty welcome. That's the fun stuff. The boring stuff is your webinar tools here. So just a reminder of what you can use or not use as panelists. The chat works to talk to the other panelists as well as the hosts. The raise hand feature works for panelists, and if you are a participant watching this, when it becomes the public comment period at the end, that raise hand feature will work for you as well. The Q&A tool will be turned off during the meeting. We're as much as possible going to try to make this feel like you all as RPAG members are around a virtual table talking. And if you're someone who is helped by seeing captions, we've turned on the closed captioning. So this is all kind of the mechanics piece of it. And if you have any questions about it, my colleague here, Pauline Mogalewski, is serving as kind of our tech support. And so you can reach out to her directly, message her, and I'm sure she'll be happy to help you use all the tools. So once again, welcome to the RPAG members, but also to all the attendees who are joining in the webinar, and the several individuals who we know are watching the live stream on the PSE YouTube page right now. Okay, next slide, please, Will. So my request of you, and again, I'll say who I am more in a moment, but my request is that you all, engage constructively and courteously, that you kind of respect my role as a process guide. While you all are experts in your own field, sometimes those fields don't overlap, and this is a public setting. Anyone can join and watch, and so just watch the use of acronyms. These meetings, this one is a long one, but sometimes there will be more that you all want to say or more that members of the public want to say. And that's the purpose of a feedback form. So Pauline, can I ask you to drop the link to the feedback form in the chat just to remind people where that is? That would be great. And yeah, public comments will occur at the very end of the meeting. So thank you for linking that there. Next slide. Many of you know this time-honored tradition at Puget Sound Energy, which is to begin any meeting with a safety moment. And so if you're new to that, I've learned actually quite a bit through this. So October is Pedestrian Safety Month. And so just some, I'll say fun facts, but maybe we'll say important facts about that is to cross roads at the sidewalks, put away your cell phone, remove headphones, watch for cars coming in out of driveways, backing up, etc., and walk on sidewalks whenever possible. If you moving forward, if you ever have a good safety moment that you want to share, I'm sure PSE would be open to using yours. So next slide. Okay, so here's our agenda. We're starting with just a little bit of a review, and then we're going to go into kind of shorter introductions where we'll share some of the introductions of PSE staff. We'll do longer introductions so you all can get to know each other a little bit. And then we'll shift into content, which is what is this Resource Planning Advisory Group, and what is this IRP, and what is the timeline and all the rest. I'll come back in to talk a little bit more about your draft charter. And the draft charter was posted on the website, and perhaps I could ask Pauline as well to find that link if people want to pull that back up again. This is a draft charter, and we'll be talking more about your way of shaping it because this is your group. We'll have a break at that point, and then we'll do a discussion. We have some polls and some things to be a little bit more interactive to talk about how you want to spend your time as an RPAG when it comes to the work plan, the timeline, the topics, all that stuff. Discuss some next steps, and then we're going to open it up to the public. We know that there have been a lot of people who have been involved in the previous iterations of these IRP when they were more like open meetings, and we know that some of them will want to share their thoughts. So there'll be a public comment opportunity, and that's really kind of a listening mode for us here as the consultant team, PSE, and you all as RPAG members. And we will adjourn no later than 5 because many of us have many places to be other than in front of their screen. So any questions about that agenda? No? All right, Will, next slide. Okay, so I'm going to just pause here and tell you a little bit about myself because I don't know many of you, and you, whether you elected or not, have chosen me as your facilitator. And so I work for Triangle Associates. We've been around for 40 years. We're the oldest firm of our kind, meaning that we've been providing facilitation as a neutral third party since 1979. And I'm really committed to that neutrality. And what I mean by neutrality is not that, I somehow am this beacon of impartiality and I am just a robot. But what it means is that I don't have a stake in the outcome. In terms of what this IRP looks like or feels like or anything like that, that's not my business. My business is to make sure that this is an inclusive process, an equitable process, an informed process, and if possible, a dynamic process to allow you to all have a reason to come and show up and work together and share your expertise. So I've, as a director and principal of Triangle, I have worked with a whole range of technical advisory groups from affordable housing, environmental remediation, and then I mentioned a minute ago, those IRP more public meetings, I've been honored to serve as the facilitator in that setting. So I take it very seriously. Part of my neutral third party is that I work for everyone. I work for the process. So in the chat, Pauline is going to stick my cell phone number in there. And yes, it has a 914 area code. So it's proof that I'm a transplant here about, I don't know, 15 years ago. And I encourage you, you can call me. I'm happy to talk with you about what's going well and what's not going well. And in fact, we'll have an opportunity in a little bit to make that more of a structured opportunity for us to talk. So really delighted to be here, really delighted to serve you. And I enjoy my role as a facilitator for these technical groups, but also my commitment to the public to have them continue to have a voice in shaping what happens within this RPAG setting. Today's meeting, we're also going to hear from Philip Popoff and Kara Durbin, who I think many of you know, and I'll let them say a little bit about themselves when they get going. So one last thing before we move on to the next slide, which is if you are watching the live stream and you want to provide a public comment, you have to do that by being part of this webinar. And so to do that, you have to register for the webinar, and I'm going to just verbally share with you. You need to go to pse.com/en/IRP/get-involved. So register for the webinar if you want to make a public comment if you're not part of it. And thank you for anyone who is joining us on the live stream, because we know some people, it's easier to click a YouTube link than register. So I think those are all my introductory notes. And with that, we'll go to the next slide, please. All right, Kara, go ahead.
Great, Sophie. Would it be all right if I let Philip introduce himself first, and then I'll go into this section? Does that work for you?
Go right ahead.
Awesome. Philip, are you ready? Do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Kara. We will be. We kind of asked everybody to introduce themselves a little bit later, but I'll just tell you all a little bit about myself. So I've been at PSE for 26 years. I'm the director of resource planning analytics. I've been in resource planning for almost 20 years. I was in the rate department for about 6 years before that, 7 years before that, and in my time at PSE, I've gone to the UW's executive management program, some Stanford strategic decisions and risk analysis program. So it's been great. Learned a lot here the whole time. This area is always changing, so it's been fantastic. Before coming to PSE, I was at the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission for a few years, and even before that at the Virginia Commission for a couple of years right out of school. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'm glad that you all are able to join us. I think I've been thinking about you all as kind of the dream team of an advisory group. So thank you all very much for taking the time out of your schedules to help us.
Awesome. Well, it's hard to follow Philip, but I will anyway, because it's my turn. So as Sophie mentioned, my name's Kara Durbin. I lead the clean energy strategy team here at PSE. I've been here about 8 years now, and one of my primary focuses is leading the development of our clean energy implementation plan under CETA. Our biennial updates due in about 48 hours. And I work closely with our integrated resource planning team, with Philip's team, particularly on the engagement side of things. So I just want to echo Sophie and Philip's comments about how much we appreciate you making time to be a part of this new technical advisory group. And if we can go to the next slide, I just want to explain a little bit more about why we're making the changes we are to engagement for this cycle. And it really stems from wanting to ensure that we have more ways for the public to meaningfully participate and engage with us in these resource planning conversations. So we want to have a process that is more inviting, more inclusive, and brings diverse voices really into the conversation. Structurally, it is a change from how we've done things in the past. Sophie mentioned that. And so it may take us some time to draw in some new voices into the public webinar space that haven't previously been engaging with us like this. We are seeing it as a two-track approach. So we have the public webinars that are really designed to engage with a broader audience. These are not intended to be detailed technical conversations, but hopefully conversations that are interesting with information that's digestible, where we can still get feedback that can inform the work that we do. We've already held one of our first public webinars and are planning a couple more within the next few weeks, and expect we'll probably have some next year as well. So, and then we have this technical advisory group, which, as I mentioned, we feel fortunate to have, to really provide that more technical advice and input on a range of resource planning topics, and they're highly technical ones for the most part. In those conversations, you'll rarely hear from me because I'm not a technical expert, but you will be hearing from Philip's team, from the resource planning and analytics team, and we'll be benefiting from the dialogue with all of you and the expertise that you bring. So our intent is that with these two tracks, there are just a number of different ways for those that are interested to participate, whether it's through written feedback, through in the public webinars, public comment, and other means. So if you could go to the next slide, Will. I also want to talk about how we're going to consider public input in this RPAG setting. We intend to continue to keep track and respond to the public feedback that we receive using our usual method of preparing a feedback report, and plan to post that to our website and make it available to RPAG members. And we'll also summarize the public comments and the feedback that we hear, and share that with this advisory group directly. We'll also have a public comment period in each RPAG meeting, and also the opportunity for the RPAG to receive written feedback. And then all of you will be able to decide if you want to directly respond to any of that feedback that you receive, bring it up to discuss at an RPAG meeting, or it could turn into a topic, that becomes an agenda item. So it's really, we'll look to you. We feel like part of our role is to both make that feedback report available to you, summarize some of the public comments so you get a feeling for the themes that we're hearing, and then we'll sort of take your cue from there in terms of how you want to go from there with some of the feedback. And then, of course, it's important for us to communicate and document how the public feedback we receive has really influenced and shaped our work as we prepare our next IRP. Well, if you could go to the next slide, please. Oh, I thought I had a slide before this one. Did we skip one? Okay, there we go. So just briefly, I wanted to just briefly talk about sort of the structure that we had in mind going into the selection process. We were thinking about a size of a group of about 10 to 12 members representing organizations. We do have 12, I think by my count. I'll let folks, that's my recollection. We were really looking for expertise and professional experience in resource planning to really roll up their sleeves and help us with this work from a technical perspective. And we were looking for balance. We were looking for a balance of organizations and interests as we went into this process. All of you would have received a memo that Triangle Associates prepared that should kind of walk through the methodology that we followed in selecting all of you as members. And I believe you have the draft charter, which Sophie will talk about in a little bit. So that's a little bit about the structure. And if there aren't questions for me, Sophie, I think we're going to get to introductions with the rest of the group, which I'm excited about.
That sounds great. Any questions or comments for Kara before we turn it to you all and let you have a chance at the mic? Okay, well, I'm just going to go in the order that I see people on my screen, and it would be great if you could share your name, your affiliation, and kind of what role you see yourself playing. And I've spared you all a cheesy get to know you question, so you can thank me later for that. So first on my screen, I see Eliza. And last thing, if I mispronounce your name, please tell me. So Eliza, please go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thanks. I'm Eliza Seelig with the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee, PNUC. I'm the Analytics and Policy Director, and I am here as part of this group to share sort of my experience working on resource planning, resource acquisition, also the view that I have at looking at utilities integrated resource plans from the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee perspective. We collect data from all the utilities. We also have monthly meetings where utilities share information about what they're working on, share best practices. And so I just look forward to being able to help identify what I see happening in the region for latest practices with this group.
Great. Thank you, Eliza. Next, I see Stephanie.
Hi, thanks, Sophie. I'm Stephanie Chase. I'm a regulatory analyst with the Public Counsel Unit, which is part of the Washington State Attorney General's office. I've worked with public counsel for about 4 years now, but prior to that, I worked in environmental and clean energy work in the Midwest. And I'm very excited to be part of this process. I had participated in Puget's last round of IRP planning, along with another colleague of mine, and also participated in some other advisory groups, including PacifiCorp's IRP planning process. So, and I'm very grateful to be joined by a consultant, Dr. Ezra Hausman. I don't know if it's appropriate to turn it over to him right now, Sophie.
You read my mind. Yes. Let's
Okay.
do that.
All right, thank you. Ezra Hausman, working with the AG's Public Counsel Unit. I have been an independent consultant on energy planning and energy markets for, I don't know, sometime over 2 decades. But I have worked previously on with the public participation process, or the on PSE IRPs on behalf of Sierra Club, actually. And I've worked with the AG's office on a number of issues, including the CETA implementation issues and a number of other commission-sponsored processes. Really looking forward to working with all of you. I think it's really exciting to be working on this IRP in the context of of CETA implementation, and making sure that all of the many objectives, reliability and cost and environmental objections are all met in a way that's protective of consumers and of all stakeholders. So this should be a really interesting process.
Great, thank you so much, Ezra. And I think you're modeling right now the alternate approach of being able to, and that's something we can talk about in a little bit, but it's helpful if you assign someone within your organization or a trusted colleague, consultant, and alternate as we move forward. So thank you for establishing that right away, Stephanie and Ezra. So next on my screen, I have Froylan. Go ahead.
Hi there, I'm Froylan. Everybody calls me Froy for just ease of pronunciation. I like to be called Froy too. I'm an assistant professor here at Western Washington University here in Bellingham with the Institute of Energy Studies. And I think one of my main goals here is to take away from this, from our conversations, from our participation here at the group, is to take away what we learn and integrate them into my teaching and in my research here at the Institute. We have students that are going to be going into the utility planning space or into the utility, any kind of space. And they have interesting questions about, how do we integrate renewables? What is avoided cost? How do we increase efficiency? And, having a first-hand perspective, I hope allows me to serve their needs a little bit better.
Thanks so much, Froy. And if I didn't mention this in the beginning, these meetings, in addition to being live streamed, will then have a permanent recording on the website. So if you want to have a future homework assignment where someone has to rewatch a particularly interesting RPAG meeting, those will be available to students and the public at large. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Well, next I see Jim. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jim Dennison. I'm a staff attorney with the Sierra Club. I use he, him pronouns, and I am looking forward to participating in the group. I've worked on environmental and clean energy law for about 5 years now, previously at RMI and at Environmental Defense Fund, and now with Sierra Club. I'm the Sierra Club. We're excited about the opportunity that the transitions underway in the gas system toward decarbonization present, and looking forward to providing perspectives on how we can navigate that transition effectively and equitably, particularly, I think, by sharing some perspectives of how we're seeing different states and different utilities where we work approaching these questions. Hopefully that can add some valuable ideas. While I myself am less versed on the electric side, I will be relying on colleagues to help me get up to speed and hopefully be able to help there as well. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jim. And I bet everyone in this room either feels more comfortable on the gas or electric side, so you're in good company with that. Next, I see on my screen, Alondra. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Alondra. I'm here representing the Western Energy Storage Task Force. I'm a policy analyst with this group, and our main priority as an organization is to ensure that energy storage is being properly represented in planning and procurement venues across the Western markets. So we've been tracking other IRPs, for example, Arizona and New Mexico, and now we're here today, excited to provide some expertise in how to properly model storage and make sure that not so much that the model selects storage, but that it has the ability to select and properly reflect benefits that storage can bring to the grid. So I think that was it.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Alondra. Good to have you here as well. Next, I see Dan.
Hi, Dan Kirshner. I'm the Executive Director of the Northwest Gas Association, representing the gas utilities and pipelines that serve 10 million residential gas consumers and about 350,000 businesses, institutions, and industries in the region we represent, which includes Idaho, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia. Been at this job about 21 years. We too do what we refer to as our Pacific Northwest Gas Market Outlook, where we aggregate the IRPs of our member companies and put out a 10-year demand forecast, capacity sufficiency to serve, et cetera. I've also been quite engaged in decarbonization policies, and I too can bring a perspective on decarbonizing the gas utility space. So looking forward to the conversation, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Dan. We look forward to hearing from you throughout this process. Joel is who I see next. Go ahead, Joel.
Thanks, Sophie. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Joel Nightingale. I'm a regulatory analyst with the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. So I'm the, staff of the regulator perspective. My background is in mechanical and sustainable engineering, from my education at least, but I've worked here at the commission for a little over 2 years, where I've worked on previous IRP processes at PSE, as well as serving on PSE's Conservation Resource Advisory Group, and worked on the 2021 Clean Energy Implementation Plan as well for commission staff.
Great. Thank you, Joel, for bringing your perspective and that of the UTC to all of this. We have Katie. Go ahead, Katie.
Hi, everyone. Katie Chamberlain. I'm with Renewable Northwest. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a technical and policy analyst. And I'm relatively new to the organization, but I work a lot in the IRP space in the Northwest generally. So I'm very excited to be part of this advisory group. And before that, I worked some with Washington UTC to kind of analyze equity metrics as a result of CETA. So particularly interested to see how kind of the resource planning process evolves in the context of CETA. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. Good to have you. And John, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. John Ellis. I am staff of the Northwest Power and Conservation Council. The council is a regional organization that has 2 members from each state, from Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. We develop a few regional plans. We have a fish and wildlife program and a 20-year regional power plan. I work on the power planning side as the manager of planning and analysis. So a lot of that work is focused on power systems modeling and hoping to share some of our perspectives from a regional standpoint and be helpful. Interested to see how this process will go. A lot of exciting things going on in the power industry right now. Thanks.
Thanks so much, John. I think that takes us through all of the RPEG members. I'm looking around and I think that is the case. Oh, no, Fred, forgive me. Fred, we have one last. Fred, go ahead.
Hi there, everybody. Playing the double unmute game here. Fred Hewitt, Northwest Energy Coalition, actually located in Portland, but our main office is in Seattle, and we have a lot of organizations in the coalition, over 100. I won't go through all of it, but very wide range. I've been participating in the Puget IRP process since 2015, and our organization has been in this process since the 1980s. So I can tell you a bit more of my background at some other point, but I'm very involved in planning and regional issues for the coalition.
Thanks so much, Fred. And it's certainly last but not least, because I think I've seen you in action sharing your expertise and providing great guidance during the last IRP cycle during those open meetings. So I would like to introduce Meredith Mathis next. You'll be seeing a lot of emails from her, so it's good to put a face to the name. So go ahead, Meredith.
Hello, Meredith Mathis. I'm a communications initiative consultant on the clean energy strategy team. I work with Kara and Ray Outlaw, who you've probably heard from as well too. So I'm just kind of the main point of contact for all the behind the scenes coordination, documents, all of that. So you guys should have my contact info if you've got any questions or need any support from me. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Meredith, and thank you. All that behind the scenes work is tremendous, and we definitely wouldn't get to this meeting if it wasn't for you. So the consultant team who's supporting this effort with Triangle Associates, that facilitation firm, I'm joined by Pauline Mogilevsky, can wave and say hi, and Emily Pilchowski. You might be seeing their names and presence. They're note-taking. They are providing the tech support. And then we have Will Henderson with Mal Foster Alonji, and Triangle and MFA work very closely together to support PSE with a lot of their stakeholder-related needs. So that's our consultant team here. And I think we were aiming, and just if you wonder who Jennifer is, you don't need to come off of your camera, but Jennifer is another member of the team that works on the IRP, and we wanted her here in case you all had any questions about the schedule. So that's who that is. So I think our goal, if you want to reshare the screen, Will, our goal was to wrap up these intros at 3:05, and we're doing quite well with that. Just this helps me as a facilitator know a little bit about your familiarity with each other. Can you raise your hand if you know at least one other person in this RPEG group? Okay, one. Seeing some hands. Okay. So some of you, you're not seeing each other for the first time. I figured you wouldn't, but I like testing that assumption. Part of me is tempted to keep asking if you know 2, 3, 4, 5, but then it would just be a competition of who is in the industry longest. I just wanted to make sure that you all have at least one friendly face. Okay, so with that, I think you can go to the next slide, Will. Very good. So those are your names and organizations. You can go to the next slide as well. Keep going. You all went through all of this and you were able to see each other's faces. Okay, very good. So now we're shifting a little bit into content here. And so Philip, I think you're going to take it away. Is that true?
Yes, thank you. Sophie.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go to the next slide. We'll just do a little bit of an intro for in case some of you don't know all about PSE, and there's some interesting factoids here about PSE, even if you do know about us a little bit. So we are the largest and oldest utility in Washington. You know, one of the interesting things about the amount of pipes that we have and the amount of wires that we have, the circumference of the Earth at the equator is 25,000 miles almost, right? So we have enough pipes and enough wires to each wrap around the Earth at the equator. And we're not that big of a utility, right? We're a medium-sized utility, really. And that doesn't include transmission lines upstream. It doesn't include pipelines upstream that we don't own, just to give you an idea of the scale of what we're talking about. So as we start talking about electrification, you know, you start imagining letting go of an infrastructure that goes around the Earth and doubling the size of the one that doesn't, right? That's still there. So it's a long process. This is the other thing that's really important, I think, to keep in mind is that the electric system in the Pacific Northwest over time evolved around the gas system, not the other way around, right? Because the gas system was really kind of the competitive entrant as the alternative for a lot of electric heat, and so these two systems do work together. On really cold days, we deliver a lot more energy through the pipelines than we do through the wires. So just to kind of keep in mind, we are that dual fuel utility. We have both perspectives. Although we're different than some dual fuel utilities, only 50% of our gas customers are also our electric customers. So half our gas customers get their electricity from somebody else, like Seattle City Light, Tacoma, Snowput. So You know, we're concerned, just like our customers and most other folks in the region, about reducing emissions while maintaining reliability, affordability, and safety. So let's just go to the next slide. High-level overview of what's in PSE's portfolio right now. I'm not going to read all these. You have them for your reference. Just the coal at the end, that 750 megawatts of coal with Colstrip 3 and 4 and the coal transition PPA at Centralia, those go away at the end of 2015. So we have to fill that capacity and the energy. The other thing I would like to mention on this slide is, if you are not familiar with the Northwest Power and Conservation Council's website, they have a fantastic map that you can layer. You can do layers and whatnot to look at individual power plants. You can look at power plants by fuel type, you know, where they are geographically. So that's a fantastic resource. I love that. I love that map. So let's go to the next slide. Again, this is really just for reference. It's not nearly as pretty and fancy as the council's map, but just to give you an idea of where PSE is. So we're you can see the PSE service territory kind of on the left side in the middle. We get natural gas from northern British Columbia, from Alberta, and the Rockies. So it's quite a pipeline network. It's been around for quite a long time. So again, just kind of really for reference for those of you, if you want to take a look at those. Let's go to the next slide. So most of you are familiar with what an IRP is. It's changed quite a bit lately, and probably continuing to evolve in the future, I would suspect. So, but we're always kind of in this situation about using the best information that we have today about the future. Do a lot of analysis on what we know about the future, or what we think we know, and what we don't know. The IRP has not been a place where we make actual resource decisions. Typically, it has been used to identify if there's a resource need. You often do an RFP, or the other real big output of the IRP process has been to provide input into the biannual conservation program planning process. So the electric IRP is technically every 4 years, with an electric progress report in the middle. Our last electric progress report that we just filed, I can't believe we just filed it in the end of March of this year, was far more like a full IRP. We incorporated a lot of new things in there. We incorporated a lot on climate change, to our load forecast, to our resource adequacy analysis, and that kind of rippled through all of the work. So it was much more of a full-scale IRP than a progress report. Gas IRP is still every 2 years, so nothing different there. So let's go to the next slide. One of the things that we're, as we are working on improving and listening to feedback that we received from last time, we've talked a little bit about improving public engagement methods, and so we'll have the technical advisory group, which is what you all are. That's not a substitute for the public process. We still get public input. One of the things we heard very clearly was to incorporate the Inflation Reduction Act, the impact on conservation type resources. So we are working right now with Cadmus. We're engaged with Cadmus, does our conservation potential assessment. They're working on doing that for us, and doing it in a way that can be somewhat flexible, because those are often income driven subsidies from the federal government. So we need to be able to reflect that element of it. Wanted to see an emerging technologies and technology assessment. We're working on that as well. We're contracted with Black and Beach to help us sort out a lot of that kind of material. Refining the assumptions on alternative fuels, updating our electric vehicle forecast. We have a much higher electric vehicle forecast now than what we saw in the electric progress report that we filed. Again, updating the effective load carrying capability of energy limited resources, including batteries. One of the things we've done is we've followed through what we did last time. So last time we actually hired E3 to do our resource adequacy work for us. At first, we hired them to give us a critique, and then we just hired them to finish it. So we liked what they had to say so much, we just hired them to do it. And this time we're doing the same thing. So they're working away on that. Also, at the same time, the Western Resource Adequacy Program, the RAP, they're also working toward creating that. If you don't know what that is, that's a number of utilities from around the West joined to have a common view of resource adequacy, to have some standardization. And we're a member of that, and they are working toward developing resource adequacy metrics, so planning reserve margins and effective load carrying capability type things out beyond just 5 years. So there's hopefully that material, some of that material might be ready in time for us to be able to use them for this IRP. We'll see. Let's see. And then, sorry, Fred's note crowded me out there. Yeah, so some of the feedback we heard was increasing the amount of time for the public to review the draft document. So yes, that's on our schedule this time. I think the progress report, technically, I don't know if there's a requirement for a draft document to go out. This time for sure is a full IRP, so we'll be doing the 4 months out kind of thing. So let's go to the next slide. So of course, wait, there's more. So we are continuing to improve the electrification assumptions and analysis. There was a general rate case that was settled, and there's a number of provisions in there to conduct a decarbonization study, to update a decarbonization study, do some pilots, and then develop a targeted electrification strategy. All that work is underway. We have been refining assumptions for alternative fuels, including green hydrogen. Might cost a little more than we thought in the last IRP, but we'll be talking about that at some point. Updating the customer benefit indicators. That's again, this and including equity and resource planning, especially on the gas side. These are several new requirements, relatively new from CETA. And we're working to incorporate those into all of our planning. And then finally, I guess I'd mention also the analyzing the customer bill impacts. That is, I think, gets to be really important in terms of understanding when you're talking about, tens of millions of dollars and 1 million customers. Scale it's important to look at things through the customer lens. So we are working at improving to go all of our work, not just stop at the incremental cost level, because usually you're looking in what's the marginal cost and marginal benefit, and you're good. But this time we'll be pushing it all the way through into rates as much as we can to look at bill impacts, not just rate impacts, but the bill impacts. So, okay, let's go to the next slide. And so, Kara, do you want to come back on real quick?
Sure. Yeah. And I realized that I covered a lot of this earlier, but I'll just reinforce a couple things. Again, just noting that we will continue to prepare our feedback report for written comments that we receive and track them and share those with the RPAG and as well as on our website. And we will work with you on ways that make the most sense in terms of bringing you the themes and the summaries of kind of what we're hearing from public input, so that you can benefit from understanding what we're hearing, and it can influence your work. So, and then we're still committed to making sure that we're clear about how we're reflecting feedback as we develop and finalize the IRP itself. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any, but I realize I got excited and covered some of this before, and just wanted to reinforce that we feel like this is important to us. So let us know if there are ways that you think we can improve kind of that feedback loop between our public process and the work that you all are doing.
Great. Thanks, Jim. I see your hand. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, definitely appreciate y'all's commitment to maintaining opportunities for public comment and public engagement throughout the process. You know, I understand there's going to be variation in sort of general public sort of level of interest and interest in engaging on some of the deeper issues. I wonder if you could just like speak a little bit to some of the ways you see there being opportunities for sort of different levels of engagement, you know, perhaps for members of the public who are interested in diving in a little deeper than perhaps the general public webinars might primarily be geared toward, and ways that you see the RPAG and public participation kind of working together and dovetailing, recognizing that you've talked a little bit about that, but just to elaborate further, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, Jim. I think we're going to have to, I'll be honest, so I think we're going to have to see how it goes. So you know, we are trying to strike that balance of kind of getting what we feel like is trying to strike a balance in the right level of information for sort of a broader, more public audience, and also keenly interested in knowing what are they interested in learning more about, and how can we help with that. There's also engagement that we do in the development of our clean energy implementation plan, out in the communities, you know, talking to community-based organizations. We do surveys. So there's a lot of different tools that we have for kind of both learning more from the public and sharing more information. I think in terms of the sort of the feedback loop between this new group and our public track, you know, I've shared some ideas of how we think that might work. Like we see that summary as hopefully being something that can give you a high level sense of here are the themes that we're hearing from the conversations we're having in the public track. But we also want there to be the feedback report. So if you want to dive in and see the 6 questions that came up around theme A, like that you have a little bit more of the detail there. So we're going to be kind of listening and taking some cues from this group on how you think that feedback loop can work more effectively. And if you have ideas, we're really open to them. I hope that helps a little.
Jim, does that paint a little clearer of a picture for you? Any follow-up?
Yeah, it sounds like you know, there's some kind of flexibility to settle on what's gonna work best as we all learn a little bit more from understanding, right? And yeah, appreciate the elaborating a little bit. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other reflections, questions, or comments before we talk about your charter? Well, Jim, I'm going to use your question as a segue here, because your charter is really your collective statement as a group about how you want to operate with each other, with PSE, and with the public. This is a draft charter, and I think it'll be a place for you all to have more conversations down the road. And so, Will, I am going to steal screen sharing from you and just walk everyone through the high-level version of this charter. While I'm going through it, keep in the back of your mind that one of the things I've done over the last 10 years here at Triangle when I've started a new group is to do kind of a convening assessment. So meet with you all one-on-one, 30 to 45 minutes, whatever you can lend to us. And I hear, what are your hopes for this group? What are your concerns? And some of those concerns and hopes can be structurally addressed through a charter and other means. And so in the chat, can I ask Pauline to put the doodle poll sign up for a one-on-one interview with me? We're going to also follow up with an email that will have that same link for those who weren't here. But I guess the big takeaway is I'm talking through this. We'll talk about it as a group, and then you'll get bored talking with me about it some more during a one-on-one. So let me share my screen one moment. Okay. Open this back up here. Can everyone see the draft resource planning advisory group charter? We look good? Okay. Beautiful. So the purpose you all talked about, but really to lean in, this is the expert technical advice space. And those key topics are resource needs, supply and demand side resources. I heard in the beginning, people mentioned already the Clean Energy Transformation Act like 3 times during this meeting, and the Climate Commitment Act, CCA, resource alternatives, candidate portfolios, comments and recommendations, and again, that other amount of expert technical advice. Philip called you his dream team. So just a chance to have that level of technical discussion. So Kara mentioned the RPAC membership, and I'll just pull back a little bit and say you all were chosen today through a process that involved a blind evaluation by 3 PSE evaluation panels, but also independent consultants, including an independent consultant who was just hired for the convening process. She had no prior experience with any of the IRP stakeholders, and it's not serving in my role moving forward. And really, the composition was intended to have that balance of interest. Here are the balance of interests. I want to acknowledge something, which is having an environmental justice and or social justice perspective was really important to PSE in doing this. And they did some outreach to organizations where this is specifically their mission. Due to resource and time constraints, this initial RPAG doesn't have someone who stands forward and says, yes, like this is the interest of my organization, but it's something that PSE is working on. And in the interim, PSE also has an equity advisory group, and they will be playing some role in helping shape this. So there's an open seat at the table, and we're looking to fill that at some point. With terms, about a 2-year term, and the other piece is this criteria. So you all met the criteria. So you're either a member of public council or the UTC, or you have educated or demonstrated professional experience in a number of related topics with a track record of working with organizations. This is everything Kara said before, so I went pretty fast. The parts that I really want us to talk about individually or collectively here is what is PSE committing to by doing this. They're committing to be accountable to you all by sharing how this feedback and recommendations were used, to provide opportunities for public comment in each meeting, to make the materials available at least 3 business days in advance, and then be clear about the level of decision-making power that you have throughout this process. Right now, in the name advisory group, this is an advisory group. It's not a decision-making group. Your main decision will actually be around this charter and agreeing to it, but from there on, it's advisory. And so these are things I'll ask when we meet one-on-one. Is there anything else you'd like to see PSE commit to? I'm going to jump through these and then I'll stop talking. These are what the items that PSE is hoping that you all as RPAG members can commit to, which is to participate in these discussions, to contribute your technical expertise, to recommend best practices, to be available during the 2-year cycle or assign an alternate. So that's something I'll be asking you about too. And then consenting to live streaming and recording meetings on YouTube. That is part of our commitment to the public. And so if you have any concerns about that, please let me know when we meet one-on-one. The group conduct, this is kind of the least complicated part of this charter is just, be respectful, be on time, all that good stuff. And then my background, in addition to facilitation here at Triangle, a lot of our work is rooted in conflict resolution. Conflict happens, it sparks, it's energy, it's all good, and I'll be there to help resolve it should it arise. With roles and responsibilities, you know what, let me pause there and just see, does anyone have any feedback on, at this point, what PSE is committing to and what you all are committing to, and anything about conduct? Any reflections right now? All right, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, just well, questions. So on the first bullet under the to PSE commitments, I'm seeing, sharing how RPAC feedback and recommendations are used or not, and I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to include recommendations from the public as well in that, which I sort of understand to be more intent to document public questions and recommendations and give responses. And then on the RPEG commitment, on the second bullet, I see enabling PSE to meet obligations under some listed statutory provisions, which I understand to include the requirements for public participation in the development of the IRP, and recognizing that, as again has been said, the RPEG process isn't a substitute for a more open public process. Perhaps it would be appropriate for that bullet to say something like, to help PSE effectively meet its obligations, recognizing that sort of this isn't the whole hog.
Yeah, so Emily is our note taker today. This is a draft document. We're going to come to you with your next meeting with some edits. So 2 edits here for PSE to consider. One is for to be accountable to members of the public to their feedback. And then the second one under RPAC commitments, what Jim just mentioned about, this is not the PSE's full way of engaging with the public. There's a separate public webinar track and there's other items there. I think you used the whole hog analogy, and I don't know if that's a legal term of art, but I liked it. It helped me understand what you were trying to get at. So thanks, Emily, and PSE. We'll be talking about these. Any other reflections from anyone else? Yeah, Fred, go ahead.
Hi, first I was having trouble hearing Jim, so Jim, if you could speak up a little louder next time. I do have a comment actually on the previous page on the, let's scroll back up a bit more. I will have a comment when we're done with this part of it about membership, but this is more specifically about purpose. So, and I think that's actually up on the first page. Right. Under the purpose section, I'd like to suggest something additional. And this, I'll propose some language, but can use it as a starting point. The role of the IRP has shifted a great deal, especially with the advent of CETA and the CCA. So it's no longer, it is still, but no longer just a technical exercise in looking at modeling and inputs and all the rest of that and scenarios and what have you. Increasingly, it's also about how new energy is acquired and how that value is delivered to customers. So I think there's a need in the purpose section to have something reflecting that. So I would suggest language such as adding a bullet that says equity considerations in resource planning and delivered value to customers. I'm not necessarily saying that should be the final language, but something that reflects that, because I think it's especially given that the commission has now decided to, in effect, merge the IRP and CEIP processes into one regulatory review. The equity aspects in CETA are really kind of, pretty in the forefront now, not just merely whether, the right resource stack is being acquired, but who gets that value, who's included or not included, and what the kind of, like I said, the equity aspects are. So that's my suggestion.
Thanks so much, Fred. Does that, you said you had a comment also about membership that was related. Did you want to speak to that now or come back to it?
Yeah, the membership thing is more about the current membership, and I'll wait till we're done with this,
okay.
The section working on the actual language.
Great. So let's hear from Dan, and then I might circle back to Jim to have him repeat himself just in case someone else couldn't hear him. So yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, Fred, thanks. That's a good suggestion. I'm unclear on how you define delivered value. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, the issue is, for example, I'll just give an example, a typical and difficult one. For example, in delivering energy efficiency, there's a significant issue with delivery to rental properties. There's an underlying issue, obviously, with, people call it the split incentive problem. We haven't really talked about that sort of thing very much in the IRP in the past. Most of the focus has been on the conservation potential assessment, but pretty evidently, especially as energy efficiency becomes not just a nice thing to have, but an even more essential thing to have with the kind of load growth that we're seeing in various parts of the system, and the need to go back and also the impact of rising costs, rising rates on customers. The people who live, and I'm a renter, so I'm kind of speaking from experience here. The people who pay for it is everybody, but are we making sure that the delivery is occurring in as much as we can, equitable fashion?
Thanks, Fred, for that example, the specific. Dan, did that help you, that example expand out? Okay, thumbs up there. Jim, just in case others were having trouble hearing you, and now that I'm also decided I was going to take notes live here, can you just, in just one sentence, recommend your adjustment to this commitment statement here?
Yeah, and sorry about that. So under PSE commitments, first bullet, I recommended sharing how RPAG and public feedback and recommendations are used or not used. And then under the RPAG commitments, second bullet, suggested just saying that members will contribute their technical expertise to help PSE effectively meet its obligations, recognizing that those include some public participation obligations that I don't think would be fully met through the RPAG process.
Thank you for the repeat. Great, Fred, I see your hand again. Fred, can we hear you? Let's see. I think we can hear you, Fred. Do you want to try speaking again?
Yeah, no, I was just taking my hand down because I forgot to do that.
Okay.
And I have to tell you, I'm sure we're all dealing with this. Every time we get on Teams or Zoom or WebEx or whatever, it seems like the hand thing has moved to some other location.
Yes.
Right now, it's in a good spot for me, but anyway, so sorry about that.
Yes, I have a dream sometimes of facilitating a session with all the mega online platforms that getting them to agree on where the exit button is and where the share button is. These are not important things in the scheme of things, but pet peeves for a facilitator. So anyway, anyone else have any initial thoughts here before we just jump to the next section? Yeah, Stephanie, please.
Hi. Yeah, I think I'd just like to second Fred's recommendation on including the mention above and the purpose. He makes a good point about that the process for the IRP and the CEIP is sort of, or they're being dealt with, I guess, more through the CEIP. So I think including that in the purpose would be helpful.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Stephanie. What I'm hearing a lot of people talk about is how can this charter reflect today's realities of how the IRP is really used or really functions, and the various processes and legislation that come into play. Anything else? All right. So in terms of roles and responsibility, PSE had the decision-making authority to convene and select RPAG members in conjunction with my facilitation team, but also the external facilitator. And then, yes, they have sourced myself to really be that independent, neutral third party. They review the work plan, they review the agenda items, and then they are sure to provide the accessibility accommodations that we'll talk about in a minute. In terms of your role as RPAG members, like I said, you're an advisory group, so you'll provide advice. And then, I think, Fred, you were speaking about the equity component earlier, and so it shows up here a little bit, which is resource planning on specific items related to clean electricity planning and its impact on vulnerable and highly impacted communities and customers. So that combines a little bit of what Stephanie was saying too with CETA. And you all can provide feedback on the annual work plan, on agenda items. You can recommend agenda items, and we can talk one-on-one a little bit about how you want to make that happen. Like I said, start thinking about who you want your alternate to be. What do I do, and what does my wonderful team do? I support you all impartially. I really take it seriously that I work for the process. I really do. I work for the process, and I work for you all, and also the public who has a role in shaping all this. And so I'll help with agendas and pre-work materials and help PSE get its materials out on that website 3 business days before. Any conversations that I have one-on-one with you will be considered confidential unless you say, no, I want you to tell PSE this, etc. Anything that we write back and forth, even though I'm an independent consultant, I am subject to public records requests or public disclosure, rather. In terms of observers and members of the public, first of all, thank you for being here. I see a number of you in the room today, as well as on the live stream. So you can attend, you can put your comments, as Kara has said, in written form. You can provide public comments at the end. And yeah, the materials are available on the website for everyone. Last 2 pieces here, accessibility. We've noted some typical accessibility accommodations that I've provided in my time as a facilitator, but if there's anything else, please let us know. You had a chance in your application to note any accommodations that you might need, but if something comes up, we'll work for you to get that to happen. And then lastly, this charter, I will ask that, certainly not at this meeting, but down the road, that you all adopt this charter. And it can be amended by whatever process you all come up with as a group, and we can talk about that now or one-on-one. In a perfect world, the charter is kind of a bedrock and doesn't get opened too often. If there are little things that come up here or there, you can supplement with maybe more specific policies. I'm making this up, but let's say this group decides they hate Zoom and they only want to meet on another platform. Who knows what? That could be a supplemental policy that doesn't need to affect the charter itself. So let's pause and talk. Did anything come to mind in thinking about the roles and responsibilities, accessibility, and this charter process? Yeah, John, please.
Yeah, thank you. So one question I have around the roles and responsibilities is specifically on the one, let's see. So if you go down to I guess it's on page 4 under roles and responsibilities in the resource planning advisory group. It talks about, it says RPAG members from established organizations may designate one alternate to represent the organization in the event that the primary participant cannot attend. Just wondering how wedded everybody is to just having one alternate. We're about to enter a planning process, and at least in our in my organization, and sometimes it can be, we have a small organization, and so sometimes it can be difficult to spread around. We do have a number of people with the expertise, and if we had to find just one alternate, it might work. Would it be okay to modify the language to an alternate, or is there a reason why it was just one? Just question.
You know, I'll turn to PSE for that one. Kara, was there a strong feeling that it was one alternate, or Philip, one of you?
Thanks, Sophie. No, I don't think so. I don't think we're wedded to it being one person. I think we were hoping that, you know, if an RPAG member can't be there, that then there is one alternate that comes in their place, not 5, say, going back to kind of the notion of the balance of the group. At least that was how we were thinking about it. So it seems reasonable to me.
Philip, I see you're off. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, I mean, my proposed alternative language would be, in that case, if that's what Philip also agrees with, just make it maybe an alternate rather than one specific person designated, or however we want to make that, just so we can be kind of rotating. But go ahead, Philip. Sorry.
I totally hear you, John. And I guess my preference, especially for you, is no, I want John. But I hear you. Yeah, I think that kind of thing, having that kind of flexibility is fine,
From a mechanical operations standpoint, if it is more than one, I know that my team tries to line up and give you all panelist links so you can come in as a panelist. So if you do assign someone else, just if possible to communicate with us in advance about who that might be. But we'll come back to that. Thanks, John. Okay, Fred, please.
Yeah, just to support that, but I had a different issue also, which is just about voting, in part because the implication of the last paragraph is that this group will vote on the charter in some fashion. I would prefer to avoid a complicated voting procedure, and this is an advisory group, so I think that our role on the charter should be also advisory, and we should have, a straw vote or a poll or expression of support or whatever from the body, and try to avoid complicated voting stuff. Long discussion about consensus versus majority voting and all the rest of it. I don't think we really need that in this group, but I think that we should be able to weigh in on the charter and, other matters that are under our scope.
Thanks, Fred. What other people think about that? Kind of a loose agreement versus an official adoption. Any other agreements or disagreements there? Okay. Well, I'll be talking to y'all about this so we can come back to that. I see Dan's hand, please.
Sorry, I was a little late to the table there. I tend to agree with Fred. Simplifying the process is easier. I guess I'd ask the question of our facilitator, Sophie. Do you find it that everything operates more effectively with this sort of explicit agreement ahead of time, or is it fine to kind of go informal, which, as I said, I would tend to go with Fred's recommendation in that regard?
Yeah, I find that there needs to be some point that we can say this is not drafting anymore and that it's final. And it could be as, does anyone have any concerns with this moving forward? Okay, I don't hear any concerns. This is now final, and it doesn't require you to all put your thumbprint on something or do some elaborate dance. So I think there just needs to be a moment in a meeting summary that says there were no objections to this moving forward. Fred, does that achieve your goal of simplicity?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. We can work through that. Very good. Okay, any other initial thoughts on this document? We have a few more discussion items, but anything else on this one? Yeah, Joel, please.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, appreciate all the discussion, and I guess it's gotten going on all the topics that have been brought up so far. And I'm just wondering, I think that PSE had set sort of a timeline for feedback on this a couple weeks out, if I'm not mistaken, from now. So if there are, specific asks, language changes or questions, are members free to reach out about those on that same timeline still?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'd have to check back with PSE about what date they kept in mind. But if I could be so bold as to talk to PSE, I think my recollection is they weren't like, here's a drop dead date. So I think if people have lingering concerns, it's okay to kind of move it out. But Meredith, if you want to put in the chat maybe what you originally shared with the group, so that we're all aware of that timeline and know that I think that doodle poll where you can have a one-on-one with me and one of my triangle colleagues, I think those goes out till December 1st. So November 14th is the suggested deadline for feedback, keeping in mind that I'll be meeting with some of you after that date. So Meredith, you can kick me under the table later if that was more of a stricter deadline. Great. Well, I did commit to giving you a break. So I want to respect that. Anything else before we take a 5-minute break? Fred, is that your hand from before?
Yeah, I'm happy to wait for the break, but I do want to raise the issue of the membership, and we can wait till after the break. That's fine.
No. I want to wrap up the this charter discussion because we have other stuff afterwards. So please, yeah, tell me about your thoughts on membership.
This isn't so much about the charter itself, but rather about the starting membership of the group. And this will take me a minute or two to go through because I have kind of a statement on this. For purposes of the overall count, of plus or minus 12, I think I would consider 3 of them to be actually, they're basically entities of the state of Washington, namely the UTC Public Council and the Power Council, which is a 4-state compact, including Washington. And those 3 should be on the group no matter what. And I think then if we look at the group we've got, now we have 9 other members. And the problem with it right now is it's not a balanced membership. As you've noted, we don't have any environmental justice or community social justice groups. I understand there were some, capacity issues. We ought to deal with that. But to start this group off without their participation, it's not sufficient. I would also note we have advocacy groups like Climate Solutions, us, Northwest Energy Coalition, Renewable Northwest, and Sierra Club that are state or regional groups, national groups. That's all fine too. But notably, we don't have any environmental, social justice, or other locally community-based organizations that work on behalf of Puget customers. That's especially important, as I've noticed, because of the connections between the IRP and the CIP with CETA's extensive requirements for community participation in benefits elements and the consolidation of all of this under the UTC regulatory approval of the IRP and CIP. The lines here are a little blurred now, which is not a bad thing in some ways because it allows us to open up the discussion. But we also object to the exclusion of Washington Clean Energy Coalition, which has been a constructive member of the PSE IRP effort for many years, as well as not having any participation, as you mentioned, from environmental social justice organizations. Saying that the company's intention is to leverage the equity advisory group isn't really a sufficient substitute for direct participation. But we also feel there's time to rectify these shortcomings. It's important not to leave out the perspective of community-based organizations, not just on the directly kind of identified equity issues, but on all the aspects of the IRP. We also think there should be more effective methods for interaction with the community during the RPAG meetings, other than just a 10-minute Q&A, comment period tacked on at the very end of the agenda. There's got to be a better way to deal with that. And between that and the online feedback form, really, there's no real opportunity for members of the public to engage directly in this process. And so we want to offer that we are very willing to work with Puget and the Commission to consider some adjustments to this, both on the membership of the RPAG and also the process. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Fred. Yeah, so I'm hearing a few things, concerns about the membership in terms of where it is on a local level or community level, the equity and social justice perspective, but even maybe state or national, and then perspectives on other environmental organizations and their role in things. And then concerns about process, so how the public is involved and this current approach of having feedback forms and public comment at the end. Is there something that could be maybe a little bit more robust is what I'm hearing you say. Yeah. So, okay. Thank you for that, Fred. I just want to open the floor if anyone has any responses or reactions to that. We're capturing this in our notes. We're going to talk to y'all one-on-one. Any reactions or thoughts? Yeah, Jim, please.
Thank you, Fred. Yeah, I think I would second just about everything that Fred had said. Recognizing that it's we're kind of building a ship they're flying at, I suppose. But I've heard in this meeting and previously a willingness from PSE to kind of consider ways to tweak the process in such a way that it would allow for the most robust form of participation, both by RPEG members and members of the public. And I hope that that as concrete proposals come forward, that those are things that will be considered and that this group can discuss, recognizing the issues that certain environmental and social justice organizations may have regarding capacity. I think they're, as Fred alluded to, would certainly be interested in exploring ways to work within those constraints and sort of overcome them where possible. Perhaps by allowing members of the groups that PSE contacted, or perhaps members of the Equity Advisory Group to participate to the extent they're willing and able in the RPAG. But yeah, appreciate Fred's comments and look forward to ongoing dialogue on that area.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, thank you, Fred, for that. This is a perfect first meeting kind of conversation about who you all want to be and who's at the table and all the rest. Any other reflections on process, membership, anything like that before we take a brief break? Okay. Well, I like round numbers, so let's come back at 4 o'clock. When we come back at 4, we have some more questions about how you want to operate as a group. We have some wrap up, and again, no later than 5. So thank you all so much. And yeah, we'll see you in 8 minutes. 1 minute, everyone. Okay. Well, welcome back. It's 4 o'clock. For those of you who don't have the chat pulled up, thank you, Froy, for saying goodbye. And that just noting here, looks forward to learning more about the IRP work plan, timeline topics, and all the rest. So thanks for being here, Froy, and thank you, Fred, for offering to follow up with PSE and Triangle and RPEG membership and opening that process. So I went off script and off slides for the last few slides here, but Will, if you could have you share again, and I'll just orient people to what we'll do in our last few minutes, our last hour together, that is. Beautiful. So you can flip through these. We talked through the actual charter itself. So let's go. Okay, keep going. I think the other direction. Oh, I think meeting preferences, beautiful. Okay, so it is the end of a Monday, and so just to keep people on their toes. Oh yeah, Fred, I see your hand.
Sorry, again, dealing with a double mute here. On the previous slide, it mentions the SharePoint site. Is that the previous slide there? Yeah. I'm just wondering whether that's going to make it difficult for non-RPAC members to view presentations and other materials. Puget has been very good about posting the slides for these meetings, for the IRP meetings in the past. And I wouldn't want that access to be restricted. I guess you could argue that there might be more detailed technical work that could be on a SharePoint site or whatever. I'm just not clear about what the scope of this will actually be and whether it would reduce the ability of the public to look at materials.
Yeah, great question, Fred. Kara, can I ask you to speak to that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Fred. Our intention is to still have our meeting materials, our slide deck, our agenda, hot sheet, anything else that we have to, support the meeting to be posted on our website like it has been before. So our intention in mentioning we have a SharePoint site was not to sort of limit access to those things. We would provide them just the way we have before. That's our intent.
Yeah. And if I could speak to this, a lot of this has been modeled off of what the Equity Advisory Group does, and they have an internal SharePoint site where they can have certain resources there, and then there's a public facing item for certain materials. So we can try to be a little bit more specific as we move forward.
Yeah, I appreciate the additional info on that and the commitment on that. Just to say, this is just me personally, the Northwest Energy Coalition, we use SharePoint like most places do. We have Microsoft Office in that, and I find SharePoint to be really hard to deal with. That's probably the nicest way I can say it.
We can look into alternatives too. If we can look into Google Drive or Box, or I'm just listing companies at this point. But yeah, we can talk to PSE and talk to you all in our individual conversations about what works and what types of things might be there versus a public website, if anything. So I think that that's really up for discussion. The other thing, just while we're on, oh great, Joel, please.
Actually, I think you might have just answered it. I had a similar question to Fred, and was kind of curious to better understand, not regularly attending EAG meetings, what kind of materials get distributed via one channel versus another channel. So it'd be helpful to get more clarity on that now in a future meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll connect with the PSE staff who maintains that, as well as my colleagues on Triangle who support the EAG meeting. So I should know the answer to that, and I don't. So thanks for those questions. Other administrative commitments that I may have glossed over in the actual charter is just you all will receive a meeting summary that has kind of key discussion topics. And then Kara has mentioned that feedback report, which will also include a summary of public feedback. So those pieces we talked about. Go to the next slide. So here's a little bit of a discussion, seeing that it's 4:04, and I don't know about you, but Monday afternoons can be like that. We decided to liven things up with an interactive poll. And we might be using these throughout our process, so it's good to get familiar with it now. And so we're using a platform called Mentimeter. And so we'll be asking you a few questions about the time of day, the day of the week that works in general for meeting, and then kind of this trade-off question about, like, would you rather have more meetings that are shorter or fewer meetings that are longer? And then we have another kind of discussion prompt around what topics are most important for you to discuss. So in the chat, just to the panelists, I'm going to ask Pauline to put a link either directly to this Mentimeter, or if you're someone who, I don't know, prefers to do certain things on your phone versus on your computer, there'll be another way of doing it. So option one, just click that link and a new browser will open up with your poll questions. If you're a phone person, you can go open your browser, go to menti.com, they'll ask you for some numbers and you'll put in those numbers. Don't share that. We're not putting this on the screen just because it's anonymous, and so we want to make sure that this is our pack. This is what you all want to be doing, so we want to make sure that just you all are the ones weighing in. And so, Pauline, if I can get you to share your screen. So switch with Will, and your colleagues who are not here today, we're going to send them these same links, and then they're going to add their thoughts to it as well. So let's start with in my mind, the fun one, the substantive one here, which is ranking the topics in order of importance from your perspective for RPAG. This is not saying that the lower ranked discussions won't get talked about at all, but we want to know what your interests are. You know, do you want more energy spent on resource adequacy, the conservation potential assessment, the resource alternatives, electrification, load forecasts, alternative portfolio plans, distributed energy resources, and electric system planning heat map? And then we'll take a minute when we wrap this up and say, what did PSE miss? Is there another important bucket that you think should be prioritized? So this is the question. I want to just look around the virtual room. Who is having trouble accessing Mentimeter? Fred, are you having trouble accessing it? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm on the site. The problem or the question I have is about the order we're doing this. I thought we were going to go through the whole presentation about the process here. I don't know that I'm really ready to fill this in quite yet, actually. And also to talk about the committee, time and, number of meetings and so forth. I feel a little better if we did that before we do this voting, but, if you're already on the way here, I guess we can do that.
Yeah, we can come back to this, and this is not an absolute. I think we'll come back to you with these questions here. So we did get a little out of order in talking about the substantive kind of order of importance and then the administrative pieces of meetings. So forgive that kind of inverse. But yeah, Fred, we can certainly come back in future meetings and see where these things and how it shifts or changes over time.
I also have to say, I kind of, these issues are all important. So I'm a little worried about, we don't want to drop any of them because of this kind of informal voting process. But I think it's not a bad idea to get a sense of, what are the hot topics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's exactly what this is. This does not turn into some automatic calculation of how many minutes per meeting are spent in each one throughout the IRP cycle. It's just to give PSE a sense of where your interest lies. And for those of you filling it out, if you only feel like one is super important, you can drag that one up. You don't need to rank all 7. So I'm seeing right here, Pauline, about 5 people have participated. So is anyone having trouble entering? And I will ask that if you have joined as an alternate and your primary person is here, that maybe just one of you participate in this poll. I think I see still 5. I'll give everyone another few moments. Very good. Oh, good. If I'm squinting correctly, I think I see 6. And so I think we should hope for 7. Beautiful. And you know what? I think, Fred, you're calling me out on a real mistake that I made, which is jumping to the interactive pieces before the conversation. So that is totally my bad. Totally my bad here. So I think I've gotten my agenda all mixed up here. So let's, this is great. This is preliminary. Let's take this down. I'm surprised no one kicked me harder from the other, from my PSE colleagues here. So let's take this down. Fred, if you want my job next time, you got it. And let's have Philip do a little bit more talking about these topics. Rewinding. All right, now you have a preview of Mentimeter. Beautiful. Let's go to the next slide for you, Philip.
Well, and I just want to make sure that just with the order, Sophie, is that if you go back a couple slides, right, we were going to talk about these. Just want to make sure that's still in your scheme. I will launch when you tell me to launch. But
yes, the Mentimeter combined all of the questions, and so then I got thrown off by seeing the resource question. So how about you do your thing, and at the end there'll just be an interactive thing that has the topics plus meeting preferences in one go. So yeah, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Sophie. And that just shows you all how much we appreciate Sophie. We just we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm not going to go through all these slides. There's a lot of different ways to look at the same kind of information that we're going to talk about. But big picture, we at this point we are pointed at a filing date by January 1st of 2025. That date caught us a little by surprise because we've been filing them at the end of March through all these cycles, but the commission staff pointed out that we should be doing them by January 1st. We've been working on a couple of different alternatives, basically. Now, I'm not sure if the alternatives, if the commission has the legal flexibility to allow us to have a different date, but that's pretty much what we wanted to talk about, wanted to bounce off you all here. Let's go to the next slide. So I kind of mentioned this earlier. The current IRP process is a little different than what we're wanting out of it now. And I think Fred and a few others might have pointed out even more differences as the commission has kind of deferred from addressing the IRP. I don't know quite how to describe it. Right? They've said that they're not going to be addressing whether the IRP itself complies with the filing requirements. That'll just be be addressed in the CEIP, or the Clean Energy Implementation Plan. I'm trying to not use acronyms, so if I do, I'll pinch myself. How close that linkage becomes and what that all means, frankly. So I think we're still in this kind of transitional period trying to understand all this. So what we've been working on is an alternative that would have us file a combined IRP and CEIP in October by October of 2025. So we think that's a better use of resources, going from the IRP all the way through into the CEIP. It does bring up well, there's already a lot of new things that I think, like I said, Fred mentioned, there's new things in an IRP, or at least in the CEIP, that are new. So I have to deal with some different things. But what we wanted to do was kind of just talk a little bit about that. Now, again, I think we have to, we'll continue to work with the commission staff on whether it's even reasonable to be talking about on October 1 filing date anyway. But I'll go ahead and present a couple of slides of our vision of what differences that might look like. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. This is a very busy slide, so I will leave this and the next one with you as to kind of ponder. I like the slide after that, kind of summarizes all of this. So that's slide 32. I think it's slide 32. So go ahead a couple. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we are firmly pointed at complying by January 1st of 2025. That allowed, we broke it down into some different categories of what that would look like when we file an IRP by that point, right? So yes, we will be developing candidate portfolios. The difference when we go over to having more time is we can work to develop more alternative portfolios to test and get more input on them. And I have a timeline slide that kind of shows that as well. Yeah, I'll get to that, Fred. I'll get to that. On and this is actually one of the things I've been very excited to be able to transition over to developing those alternative portfolios to test. And I think CETA allows us a lot more both flexibility as well as responsibility to be broader in what that means to develop these portfolios. It's not just simply lowest reasonable cost anymore. So when it would come down to there's a whole set there for the GRC commitments. So there's one on a targeted electrification strategy. So for those of you that haven't been following along with our general rate case and the settlement and all of the work we're doing, the PSE committed to having a targeted electrification strategy that would be incorporated into our next IRP. Well, that targeted electrification strategy has to be basically completed by the end of 2025. And that in order to develop this targeted electrification strategy, you back up from that, we're also working on 2 additional items that will feed into that. One is the electrification pilot project. So there's a number of different pilot projects that we're working on. And then there's also the oh yeah, I'm sorry. I think I might have said the end of 2023. The target electrification strategy is due at the end of 2024, right? So, I mean, imagine December 30th, New Year's Eve, we're done with the strategy. New Year's Day, we have to have it in our IRP. That's going to be a tough deal, right? I mean, we could put it in there, but there's not going to be it's not going to be as well informed by the conclusions or what's in that targeted electrification strategy. So then there's back upstream from that is the pilot, the pilots that we're doing to get information that will help design the strategy. The strategy will have specific targets and actions and incentives and whatnot. And then back up even from that, there's the updating these gas decarb studies by the end of this year. So that work is underway now. So the studies will be done by the end of this year. The strategy isn't scheduled to be completed until, late into next year. So into 2024. So anyway, doesn't leave us much time at all to incorporate into the next IRP much of what that strategy looks like. There's a lot, once again, you're really getting a lot more detail. We'd be able to do a lot more detail for things like the electrification scenarios. We can look at more of them, load scenarios and the impact on customer bills. Again, the more time that we have to better integrate a bill model into our planning work, the more complete that's going to be. Then when we get into the distributed the delivery system plan, having alternative high level load scenarios, that's something that we can accomplish by October of 25, not so much by the end of 24. So the hosting capacity map, that really, I think what that's going to end up looking like is understanding across our electric system, parts of the system where distributed resources could help solve problems, one where we have plenty of hosting capacity, no problem there, and then one that's, there's parts of the system that might not work well, right, or might be more expensive to integrate into, that kind of thing. And then hopefully we can even overlay that with some of the work with the equity, right? So we can kind of have a good map of where it's possible to put distributed resources and where you'd like them to go. Right? That's what we were going after there. And then I think under the regional transmission options, we have more time to get more information from like BPA if we're into an October 25th filing versus the end of the year information. And then similarly, we're going to be in a state of acquiring resources where we have a huge gap to fill, both for non-emitting energy as well as for capacity, and we'll probably be having RFPs all the time. So the more time goes on, the more of that information that we can incorporate. So let's go to the next slide. Is
Can I just pause real quick?
Oh, sure.
Fred, did that answer your question when Philip was talking about the hosting capacity map? Are you good?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay, great. Carry on, Philip.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to ask Jennifer Colson to jump on if I get anything wrong here. So keep me straight. This is schedule looking at a October of 2025 filing date, right? So these schedules are not that much different. It's just more time gives us more opportunity to get more input and to do a better work product. So there's developing the demand and supply alternatives, the initial RA work to guide the development of the alternative plans, right? So there's this kind of stuff that's going on right now. We have refining the decision variables, right? We have to update this. This is really the CBI type work, right? So there's cost versus emissions, there's cost versus risk, there's cost and there's equity implications, right? Improving how we're incorporating all of that. This gives us some time to do a more robust job with that. And then the part that I've been really excited about with developing alternative plans with the RARS is resource adequacy and resource efficiency or flexibility checks on the portfolios that we're testing, to make sure that all of the portfolios we're studying are adequate and do have adequate sub-hourly flexibility. That's a really important thing now. I think what we've really discovered is that with both resource adequacy as well as flexibility, it doesn't even really, it makes far more sense to be asking these questions as portfolios, not as individual resources. Because the value of an individual resource is like asking, what's this jigsaw puzzle piece alone without the rest of the puzzle, right? That's what you're studying, is the one jigsaw puzzle piece. And you don't know, if you study each individual jigsaw puzzle piece, it still may not make the whole picture, right? So I think that that gives us a little more time to make sure to to work with E3 on the back end to make sure that all the portfolios we're testing, which would include utility scale as well as distributed resources, are meeting those criteria. And then, again, once we develop those alternatives, evaluate them, and how does each of the criteria shake out for each of the alternative plans. So this gives us enough time to kind of do a lot of that work. And then you also see kind of on the bottom, you have the target electrification strategy is filed. Yeah, it might back up a month or two. We'll have a pretty good idea of what that's going to look like, but that gives us time to incorporate some of those results into all of our modeling work. So let's go to the next slide, which is really looks at, okay, see, this is not that much different. You just have much smaller time slots, right? So that gives us less time to do the work. It gives us less time to have engagement, right? It all kind of gets, the schedule gets crammed up a bit. So, same factors, you're just getting this all basically, having this all basically completed by the end of Q3, because we really have to have a draft IRP filing 4 months in advance, right? So September, there's a draft IRP, right? So that's not that many months away, right? So there's a lot of work that we're gonna have to get through real quickly to make that January 1st IRP filing date. And then you can see really the IRP is due, if we're putting out a draft IRP in September, the target electrification strategy isn't even filed until after that, right? So we're putting out a draft of the IRP without even really knowing necessarily what that target electrification strategy is going to look like. So let's see. Yeah, so I think that's kind of what I want to talk about with the timelines. Once again, if it may not be, if the commission doesn't have the legal authority to allow us to move those filing dates anyway, then it might just be a, gosh, I sure wish I had more time. But I'm not asking, I'm not planning to put Joel on the spot at this point. We'll let that kind of, those discussions happen so we can figure that out. But is there any questions about any of what I just went over with these timelines?
Questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
Philip, thanks for giving me the out there if I wanted it. I think it is staff's position at this point, at least from our reading of statute, there's the plain language requires a IRP every 4 years. And I think this would, October 1 filing for a full IRP would push beyond that requirement every 4 years. So that's where our thinking is. But appreciate seeing what more time could do for the process. And I think, as you know, the statute is not something that the commission has the authority to waive.
Thanks for that perspective, Joel, and being willing to jump in right in the middle. Any other comments, responses to the timeline before Philip talks about those topics? Well, I'm a visual person, so this helps me. Philip mentioned Jen at the beginning of this as just one of the teammates. Jen, was there anything that you wanted to add or clarify?
Nope, he did a good job.
Great. It's always good to get the thumbs up. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Will, and then Philip, you can wrap us up here.
Yeah. So we definitely wanted to hear what y'all are interested in. In the we probably could take more technical advice from y'all than you have time to give it to us. So what we definitely, there's definitely some things that we would all probably expect are going to be pretty important to be talking about. But we would really like to understand without knowing how much of your time that we can have, like as you mentioned, Fred, it's like, oh, all of these are important, and there's probably some on the list that aren't even on the list that we would all think are important. I think it's a matter of making sure that we're covering, right, we have to prioritize, basically. We're going to have to prioritize our time and decide, because we can out meeting you all, I'm sure. Because that's just, it's we do this all the time. But y'all are also busy. So, and I don't get you all as full-time coworkers for my IRP. I wish I could, but I don't get that. So want to make sure that we focus on the things that you all think are most important. In the past, one of the things that I know that Kelly Hall from Climate Solutions always felt would be really great is we gave more time to developing the alternative portfolios and plans. I've been pretty excited about having more time to do that as well, because it's, you don't have a model that can tell you what's the lowest reasonable cost, including all of these equity considerations. There is no magical model that's going to tell you that. So having more time to develop alternatives that we can then test, since there is no perfect model to do this, would be really good. So, but once again, these are the topics that we came up with. They're probably all very deep, and we could spend lots of time in each of them. Maybe there's others that are also important. So I think it's kind of looking at that together of what are the topics that you think are important, or that you think that you'd like to see us discuss in an RPAG meeting, and then we have to balance that with how many meetings do we get to have, and how long are they? How frequent are they? That kind of thing, right? We want to be respectful of your time, as well as respectful of your ideas. So.
Thanks so much, Philip. Does anyone have any questions about this potential topics? Need better context, definitions? Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, just a general question. I'm thinking specifically here about transmission, not on your list, but it's one I put into the voting, the little polling anyway. But it's a big, complicated, difficult topic. I thought that the presentations from your transmission and distribution folks the last couple of IRPs were actually really good, but it's become a more central focus of the planning context for all of the IRPs around the region. So I'm not specifically referring to that, but just as an example to say, would it be possible maybe to have, I don't know how to describe it exactly, kind of subgroups or meetings that where, for those who are not particularly interested, maybe you could show up or not show up, but for those of us who really want to dig into a particular topic, there really is enough time to do that and not just see a half-hour presentation, ask a couple questions and move on. And that isn't just transmission. There could be other topics like that as well.
Great, thanks for that, Fred. Any thoughts or responses, Philip?
I think we're kind of in this kind of a brainstorming stage here. So I think that's a fine idea to think about. How can we deal with if there's topics that some people are more interested than others? If you don't, well, I think that's good feedback. I don't know. I like that idea. So we'll see what we can figure out. I think that's first making sure that we sort of bird dog what all those issues might be. Then we can figure out what kind of a schedule can we dig into them on.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I do know that PSE wanted to hear more about other buckets and topics that won't show up on the little nifty poll we'll play with in a minute, but are there any other buckets that you'd like to be highlighted for consideration? Joel, please.
I guess I just wanted to clarify the second to last bullet here on alternative portfolios / plans. Is that, is the idea there an evaluation of the various portfolios that come out of the modeling process, or would that also include like brainstorming different scenarios and sensitivities and suggesting those from RPAG members?
Yeah, I think Joel, that's and I don't want to get too tripped up in all of our language, right? But sometimes we get really sunk into what is a scenario, right? And most of the rest of the world doesn't think nearly as rigidly about the definition of a scenario as we do. But I think it really is about, for example, like one of the things that we did last time was we looked at what if there was a small modular reactor. Well, what if we had that in the portfolio? Okay, it didn't get spit out from the portfolio as the least cost answer, and we've done a lot of work since then. But it didn't get spit out as part of the least cost answer. But a lot of times with Aurora, you don't know how far out of the money it might be. Is it out of the money by $5? Is it out of the money by $5 billion? Right? You don't know, and so you won't know unless you test them. Right. So it's trying to look and say, we know that there's benefits to distributed resources that don't get reflected in a model. And so we need to create what those might look like so that we can then calculate, we will know what the revenue requirement is going to be, but we also then can get some variability to understand how different things are affecting equity as well as the utility scale resources. So I don't know if that helps, Joel, but that was sort of in my mind of designing different ways of meeting the requirements using different types of resources to understand what the cost risk, what the emissions and what the equity impacts of all of them might be.
Thanks. We're going to do Eliza, Jim, and then Ezra. Go ahead, Eliza.
Yeah, thanks. I think, I just wanted to throw this out there because I was thinking about it when we were asked to rank before what was missing. It's kind of the metrics and maybe the problem formulation. It seems like early on that's a really important foundational item to understand the decision process. And so I think spending time on that background might help the members of the RPAG understand, how alternative portfolios and plans are being decided and how we could advise on that. So that was just something that came to mind. I don't know if Philip's going to kick me for that, but it feels like it kind of fits really well with what he was just talking about too.
Thanks, Eliza. Let's just go through everyone because I want to make sure we leave our full 10 minutes for public comment. So Jim, please.
Yeah, just one potential addition to this list is compliance with the CCA, that's the Climate Commitment Act, and CETA, the Clean Energy Transformation Act, as well as the equity provisions of both of those statutes. This has been discussed some before, and maybe it's more of a kind of a overarching theme that goes throughout these topics, but thought I'd mention it for consideration.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, and then I think we have Ezra.
Yeah, I mean, along those similar lines, one of the issues in CETA is that you have to have a but-for portfolio so that you can identify what costs are associated with meeting CETA. Seems like you almost have to have, 2 portfolios for every portfolio. I'm not sure. I'd really like to understand how PSE plans to incorporate that. And I think that's probably a pretty big discussion topic.
Great.
So I might summarize that as the CETA incremental cost analysis. That's what you're kind of referring to as a category.
Exactly, but obviously it's very complicated. It's like, what would we do without CETA? We do with CETA, and you really need to do both analyses somehow.
And let me just, I just want to say one more thing. Eliza, I promise I will never want to kick you in any of these meetings. I want to hear what you've got to say, and I'm not at all surprised that that's what you said. So that was a good suggestion. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks.
Great. So some of you generated some ideas verbally. For those of you who like writing in ideas, one of the poll questions asks about other questions, potential topics for discussion, and you can put those that you've already said, add some others. And again, it's a placeholder for your peers who weren't here today. So again, to get us to that public comment period, we're going to do a little replay here. Pauline, would you like to share your screen again and repost the Menti instructions? You're all going to be experts at this by now. Okay, so now 9 of you have replied, which is a higher number. Apologies if you would have had a different answer if we had done this before the conversation. I'll see if anyone didn't have a chance to respond to this one. So we'll let a few moments play out. And remember, you have to click that button that says submit. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven.
Seems like if we submitted and closed it earlier, it's sort of too late to change anything. Is that right?
I think it's too late to change anything this time around, so just accept my apologies.
We're all learning who's Mentimeter as a part of the process. So.
Yep, and remembering which questions came first in our poll here. So let's go to the next poll, and again, this is not prescriptive. So the next question is, what are the other topics that RPAC should discuss? Many of you have already submitted that. Lots of things that came up verbally, but just, I see 6 folks have participated. Let's give everyone another moment or so to maybe add another thought about topics. I see what Jim brought up around that equity piece. I see, oh, here we go, we're jumping. I think I'm seeing a bit of what I heard Eliza and Ezra share, but again, I'm the process person, not the technical expert. So if you didn't jump in with those other ones, Eliza and Ezra, please add now. So like many word clouds, the larger the word, the more time it was brought up. So it seems like transmission was the only term that came up more than once here. Very good. We'll be sharing this with your peers. So let's go to the next slide. So this question asks about what is the best day of the week for RPAG meetings. I love that Wednesday. No one likes Wednesdays. It's this nice little graph here. It seems like Monday, the majority of you are thinking Monday was good. 6 of you have responded. Let's see if we can get 7 or 8. Someone likes Wednesdays, or at least we have one Wednesday person here. I'll wait another moment or so to see if we can get up to 8 or 9 participants. This is why we asked, because when we were talking, I was like, no one wants a Monday meeting. And I'm so wrong. So wrong here. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next slide. We'll take this into consideration as things are coming along. And so whether it's a morning or an afternoon, I see that 8 of you have replied. It's pretty good. Mondays in the afternoon, it's what's happening right now. So clearly that is playing out as maybe thematically a good time to meet. Okay, great. And next slide, please. So the ultimate trade-off, I would love for more than 7 people to weigh in. Every one of my processes, I'd love to ask this question. Do you want more frequent but shorter meetings, 1 to 2 hours, or less frequent but longer meetings, 2 to 3 hours? And if it's a tie, this will get interesting. Okay, we've only beat 8 participants once, so I'm not going to push it. PSE, we're going to hear from some people who weren't here today, and that might tip our scales a little bit, but it seems like it's fairly split here.
Okay, if you haven't voted, I was going to say I'm interpreting that as an and.
Yeah, you said that PSE can out meeting you. This is your chance to get out of that.
We'll have frequent long meetings if that's what we were looking for.
Yeah, frequent and long, absolutely. Okay, beautiful. And I think that was our last slide, if I'm correct, Pauline. It is. Okay, thanks for playing along with Menti, just doing something visual at the end of the day. I'm going to ask Will, let's do your next steps, the final next step slides, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Okay, so Kara opened this meeting talking about that two-track process. You go to the next slide, the public webinar process and the RPAC meeting process. So there is most certainly going to be a public webinar on November 6th about equity and delivery system planning. I think I'll look to Meredith. Is the November 15th confirmed for the public webinar?
Yes, that is confirmed.
Okay, so confirmed for November 15th, a week later, that energy efficiency and demand side resources public webinar coming back together on December 7th within that webinar format. Oh, great. I see your hand, Stephanie. Go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick question. Have you sent out like registration links for any of that to the IRP list, or is that where can folks find that information about the public webinars?
I'll post a link to our website, Stephanie. We have not distributed links to the November 15th meeting yet.
I think the November 6th one was part of a newsletter update with a few things in it. So, but yeah, November 15th will have to be a separate one. But thank you, Meredith, for posting things in the chat. And then tentative is December 12th. I haven't looked if that's a Monday in the afternoon yet, but December 12th for your next RPAC meeting. Meredith, is there anything that I should be aware of about just how tentative that is or not?
I do not have any additional information. I'm not sure if Kara or Philip do either.
I think we wanted to see whether you all, were willing to come back and have another, get together with us all before declaring that it was official. But Kara and Philip, we'll talk. We're talking tomorrow to debrief this. And as soon as there's confirmation about that date and time, we'll try to get calendar invites as soon as possible because we know your calendars fill up. So that about wraps us up. Is there any other kind of good of the order comments or thoughts before we turn it over to members of the public who have been patiently waiting during today's meeting to share some thoughts? Very good. So I'm going to share my screen. I think if any of you attend public government meetings, you often see the timer. It just demonstrates that I'm not showing favoritism to anyone. So let me open up my timer here. While I'm doing that, Kara, Philip, can you just, do you want to just share some final remarks while I'm opening up my slide, or final thank you, really?
I'll take a chance, an opportunity to say thank you. Just appreciate everyone coming together, and we're excited to start this process. And Philip, if you want to add anything, please do.
Yeah, no, thank you all. There's a lot of challenging work to figure out. There's a lot to do and not a lot of time to do it in. So thank you all for joining us.
Great. So thank you. The hand raise feature is now available for the attendees. A reminder, if you are watching on the live stream, to register by going to PSE's website. And I'm going to do it in the order in which I see the hands went up, which is we have first Don Marsh, and then we have Jim Adcock. So allowing Don to talk, once we can hear you and know that you're settled in, I will hit start.
So can you hear me?
We sure can. Go ahead, Don. 2 minutes is all yours.
All right. Well, thanks for hearing my comment. My name is Don Marsh. I'm the chair of the Washington Clean Energy Coalition and a member of 3 previous IRP advisory groups. My organization is concerned that PSE is restricting public participation using the mechanisms you claim will enhance it. Our first concern is the siloing of resource planning and equity advocates. On slide 20, PSE says it needs to continue improving how we embed equity into resource planning. The best way to do that is to have equity advocates as members of the RPAG. That way, everyone can benefit from the concerns and diverse perspectives these folks bring to the table. The wrong way to do it is to have a completely separate table like the EAG and little cross-communication between the groups. We also take issue with the 2-track strategy that PSE has proposed. We support PSE's commitment to have public webinars that are more accessible to the general public, but that is not where members of my group belong. We have been attending IRP advisory groups for many years, but now we are excluded from the discussion and shoved into a 2-minute comment at the end when others might be tuning out at the end of a 2.5-hour meeting. That isn't enough time to have a conversation or ask a question about a relevant slide. There are many other things that we could have contributed to today's discussion, but I am already running out of time. This is not the kind of public participation we feel was envisioned in the Washington Administrative Code, which says consultations with commission staff and public participation are essential to the development of an effective plan. PSE is effectively sidelining the Washington Clean Energy Coalition, which is comprised of dedicated and well-informed individuals whose purpose is to represent the public in IRP meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, Don, and for those remarks. Oh, very noisy. Thank you for your time and those comments, Don. We're going to go to the next raised hand here, which is Jim Adcock. So I'm going to promote you, Jim, and make sure that we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We sure can. Your 2 minutes start now, please.
Okay, James Adcock, electrical engineer, MIT. I'm a dozen-year member of the IRP stakeholders group, which Puget is now killing. IRP law says explicitly, public participation is essential. Public means public. It does not mean those organizations which Puget specifically chooses to be acceptable to Puget's liking to be allowed to participate, because a small handful of organizations is not the public. Puget proposes to spend about $1 billion of ratepayer money over the next decade, and to do so without any meaningful public vetting of how Puget spends that money, and whether or not that money is actually spent for any meaningful reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, or if it is all just spent on wasteful regulatory game playing. The public deserves to have a real meaningful voice in how these $1 billion are spent, not just Puget breakout sessions with Puget representatives carefully coached to record only the answers which Puget wants to hear, not multiple choice surveys where one of the choices isn't, we want Puget to greatly reduce Puget's greenhouse gas emissions, and we want Puget to do that now, not waste another 10 or 20 years in regulatory game playing. Recently, Puget has been generating tons of electricity from natural gas turbines, almost 1,000 megawatts of power, not just during peak hours, but 24/7, 365. This is crazy. This has got to change, or not only will we lose the natural environment of Washington State, all our famous flora and fauna, but in addition, we will lose the human race. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, James. Jim Adcock, thank you for those comments and those reflections. We appreciate your time today. I'm looking at our list. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? We have time for you now. Looking. All right. I'm not seeing any at this moment. And so I think that we want to have the public have the last word in these conversations. So I'll wrap by saying thank you to Jim and Don, and thank you for the members of the Resource Planning Advisory Group and anyone who viewed on YouTube. Go ahead, Jim. Yeah, see your hand.
Yeah, I just seeing that there is some additional time, and one of Don Marsh's comments was a request for more of a back and forth or additional time to speak outside of an allocated 2 minutes if Puget is interested in offering any response or engaging in any discussion there. Thanks.
Yeah, so I think the way this was initially designed was it was kind of just a comment period and not necessarily a dialogue. But what I'm hearing from some is that there might be interest in that down the road, or as you all are evolving this. And so I'm hearing from you, Jim, that time allowing, that there could be more of a conversation. And so we'll come back to that in a little bit. But I appreciate that remark. So I'm looking, I just want to kind of emphasize a few action items or homework assignments, if you will. So please sign up for a 1 hour slot, or not hours, 1 hour, 45 minutes or 30-minute slot to do your one-on-one assessment with me. And Pauline, can you drop that back in the link? And then if you also want to bookmark your PSE.com, get involved, because that is where all of the important messages will be, the important documents and such will be. I'm going to just put that in your chat here. And then let me just look quickly at my notes here. Pencil in December 12th for an RPAC meeting, but PSE will confirm. And then otherwise on the PSE and facilitation team side, we're meeting tomorrow and the next day, I believe, to consider the feedback you've already provided on the charter, the process, just even most recently what Jim brought up now, and membership. We'll also think through strategically the SharePoint site versus public website, kind of thinking of the EAG Equity Advisory Group as a model. And then we'll send out the same poll to the members who were unable to be here today. Those were all the next steps that I captured. PSE or the facilitation team, were there any other action items? Well, thank you all so much for joining the first RPAC meeting, and I'm really excited to get you all together to discuss these important issues and also to get to know you all as individuals. So have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you, Sophie. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
Pauline,
everyone.
if you want to download the chat before we leave the meeting, that would be great.